Hello, welcome to episode 2 of Art Brunch Archives. I'm the host of Art Brunch, Rick Bowling. You may be wondering where episode 1 of Art Brunch is. The first episode was a pilot episode with my lovely partner and collaborator, Tiffany Green. While it was a fun conversation, we agree that it doesn't fit with the core of Art Brunch content. Much of this show works well as audio only, but there are times where we are referencing images on the screen. We host these archives on both Apple Podcasts and YouTube. In the podcast description, I will share a link to the YouTube video and vice versa. Lastly, before we learn about Ben, please take a moment to like and subscribe. If you want to watch these talks with our community live on Twitch, I've included those links in the description as well. Episode 2 was filmed with Ben Bradshaw. Ben Bradshaw is an MFA candidate with a focus on textiles at Southern Illinois University of Edwardsville. He has a BFA degree in sculpture from Kansas City Art Institute. His studio is located in downtown St. Louis, Missouri. Bradshaw is an emerging visionary artist working in a variety of mediums with intuitive drawing as the common denominator. His landscapes are topographies of shared psychic space, documentation of collective unconscious divined by the human hand. Through self-directed study of a variety of crafts and techniques, he has found ways to draw with materials well beyond pen and paper. Plasma-cut steel nets, ceramic dream creatures, and animated cosmic serpents are the products of Bradshaw's multimedia practice. Seen all together, his world comes into view as dreamtime becomes reality via the long song of design. Ben was a great guest, and we hope to welcome him back in the future. Enjoy the show. Hello, Ben. Welcome to the stream. Welcome to the travel agency. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Rick. I'm happy to be here.
How has your day been so far?
It's been okay. Woke up a little bit earlier than normal. Was really enjoying this weather the last couple of days. Really love gray, rainy weather. Been working on some music recently for animations. It's been kind of interesting to kind of dip in and out of making music and playing. Well, I took piano for like 6 years when I was a kid, but rebelled the whole time. There's a lot of issues there. We had a weather-damaged piano.
Okay.
But no one ever told me, so it's like no matter what I did, it always sounded wrong. And like, so yeah, ultimately, I feel like I just kind of noodled around with this broken piano and just kind of like made these like weird arrangements that have kind of evolved into like using arpeggios and doing all this like, fun stuff that now I have something, to like put with my animation and kind of like heighten both of them, to like 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing. So
yeah, definitely. I think that, and we'll get into some of the animations here in a little bit, but music is, I think in your work, the music has really changed the experience of the animations. So we've talked about, you can follow Ben on Instagram at spacetime.mountain.
Yeah, MTN, yeah.
And we've had conversations about, but we'll have conversations here about the concept behind that term and having this confluence between space-time and then also referencing like Space Mountain, the amusement park ride. And I think that the music that you're producing is like heightening this level of like amusement or thrill with these works that was taking place with the animations themselves, but now setting them to some sort of like thematic mood or some sort of like arrangement of notes or music is really kind of like heightening that experience.
Yeah, I was very much like just strictly a visual artist for so long. I mean, I actually was showing animations in my undergrad at KCI and my in the sculpture program, because that's what the sculpture program was like. And then I remember my professor like asking me why I didn't have music, and I was like, well, I just don't have a mindset for it. I don't care to include it. And he like kind of thought about it for a second, and he's like, but music is everything. So like, how do you like, you gotta, and I realized like, you watch a movie and so much of the emotional work that's happening is due to the score, like the way that the person sitting at a synth for that like cop drama, is building the tension or releasing it based off of like what kind of music they're playing. Just the subtle background track, creates so much. So yeah, that's just, me trying to kind of fill out again another facet of my world, another element of my multimedia practice to kind of be better rounded. So
cool. I wanted to read to you your horoscope for this week and ask you how accurate your experience has been to this horoscope. So for Pisces this week, and it is the last day of the week, so it's a good time. The sun is newly in your lifestyle sector, so in the coming weeks could find you eager to enhance your well-being. If your diet or exercise routine has fallen by the wayside, you could be newly inspired to get back on track. At the same time, getting organized, rearranging your routines so that you can be more productive, and jettisoning activities that no longer serve your best interests can help streamline your affairs and leave you time to relax and unwind. Philosophical Jupiter aligns with your aquatic Neptune, so you could be drawn to someone who seems to understand you. They may admire your creative and imaginative talents, and you may be drawn to their down-to-earth yet positive outlook. I'm not going to say that's about me, but it could be. If you want it, this could be a romance or a supportive friendship.
Yeah.
Finally, an awkward tie between savvy Mercury and power broker Pluto hints at tensions with a friend. A conversation could turn the situation around, but you need to be careful how you phrase what you say, which could also... Maybe I'm in tension. So I'm curious if in your lifestyle sector, if you've been enhancing your well-being or getting organized and rearranging your routines.
Yeah, honestly, it's eerily to the point. Yesterday I had a really good day and had like a lot of like clear-headedness and there's a lot of, I don't know, I see the path. Basically I'm starting grad school, the next semester of grad school in like 2 weeks. So it's kind of a good incentive to like get things in order before that starts.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, honestly, I've been thinking about that. And like, I actually kind of planned on getting a bike today or tomorrow because I haven't had one for probably about a year.
Okay.
But yeah, and so I go to school at SIUE, Southern Illinois University of Edwardsville, and they have a lot of really good trails out there. So like that would be a good way to like kind of find that kind of meditative like exercise is biking. Anyway, yeah, so that's just one thing. But yeah, jettisoning, I definitely feel the jettison. It's funny hearing power broking Pluto. Like that's a really interesting way to describe Pluto.
Power broker Pluto.
That feels like it should be like a drag persona or something. I don't know. Like there's something there.
Do you know what that means?
No, I have no idea.
I have no idea what that means.
But I feel like that's just like the nature of like, people who are into astrology is it's a certain amount of a confidence game of just kind of saying things about planets and people are like, oh yeah, that's totally how Pluto is, but I don't know. It's hard to say what is.
So the Google definition of a power broker is a person who deliberately affects the distribution of political or economic power by exerting influence or intrigue.
But don't you think if Pluto had a little bit of power that they would still be in the top 9?
Yeah, I think so.
Or maybe they just chose to distance themselves.
Maybe they were pulling the strings.
Yeah.
That
it's like the Dick Cheney of the planets. Like.
Yeah, this federation of planets did not accurately recognize Pluto's planet rights. And they've kind of like decided to secede from the federation of planets. And I mean, Pluto's doing just as good as ever.
Yeah. It's out there being their best self, their best planet.
Yeah, I mean, funding hasn't changed for Pluto. Yeah, things like that. So, two very different potentials for Pluto pulling the strings behind the scenes. That's interesting. Well, I think that horoscopes are kind of like an interesting entry point into the ways that we are looking at our lives and the way things are changing. I don't know if I necessarily ascribe to them as being like fundamental truths, or if they're just kind of like a Rorschach test for your own immediate psyche.
Yeah, that, I mean, and this kind of circles back actually to something that we mean to talk about, which is like the nature of the mountain in my name, of space-time. One of the references that I like to connect to it is the idea of the guru atop the mountain, that like someone is going through this, this journey, this like amount of labor to get to the top to find enlightenment, which is like a great metaphor for like just what life is, of just like working, laboring to like find transcendence or understanding or anything out of experience. But actually in the show Recess, Disney's Recess, in the very first episode, they go to see the Guru Kid, which is a character I completely forgot about until I rewatched recently. And I
have no recollection of that.
And Mikey's the one who's like all about it, and I'm definitely a Mikey out of the Recess pack. Kind of like half Mikey, half TJ. Anyway, tangential. But when they go to see the Guru Kid, they ask him for his advice, and he's like, look at one ant. One ant by itself is like not that strong, but if you look at the whole colony, like they're powerful together, and they like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We should rally together to like overthrow the school. Like that's like every of the journey or every plot on that show was all about like overthrowing the government of the school or whatever.
Being power brokers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, being their channeling their best Pluto. Anyway, but what was funny is that like then they walk away and another guy comes up and he's like, help me, Guru Kid, I need help with my math homework. And then he says the same parable about the ants. And so he's just saying the same thing to everybody. And so it's just like, they got lucky that it actually applied to their situation, basically. Yeah, that show was so interesting. And like watching it again, like made me realize like just how different the world was in the mid 90s, and like just the nature of, and I kind of wish I'd prepared you and like asked you to watch some of the Recess, so we'd have some shared talking points, and not just spring it on you. But the character of Miss Grokey, who was their teacher, and she was like very environmentally conscious, like very much about like one Earth and like peace and everything, and was kind of the outlier when it came to the school system, where everyone else was about like authority and like the kind of the fascist principle and the like the brutal Miss Finster with her like snitch Randall and everything. I don't know, anyway, it's just a fascinating show, fascinating phenomenon. But
yeah, I will definitely look back into it, because I do not recall.
getting back to the topic at hand.
So let's move into some questions that we have prepared. I think it might be a good time for that. And then following the questions that we go over, we'll take a look at some of the work, and maybe if some things come up as we're going through some questions, we can hop over to the work. So what I'd like to start off with, as far as like the more interviewee part of the interview, and I hope to ask this question for all of the artists that join me with Art Brunch, is I want to start by talking about your experience with art as a child, or your artistic beginnings, particularly in childhood. And so you can just start us off wherever you're interested.
For sure. And this is a great question for me, because like I feel like I find the most meat for my artist statements usually in my childhood, because I was very lucky, I guess, in the world that I was growing, like the world specifically the 90s, that is, I think, illustrated in Recess, of like being environmentally aware, talking about community, but also with all of its luxuries. We like grew up in this really like gilded age of commercial success, of like having all these toys and sugary drinks and there's just like it was a wonderland that is maybe unimaginable for the future. And also, I mean, I must like acknowledge my privilege and like my like that bubble that I grew up in, that is being a huge part of it. But I was also lucky because I was an only child, and I was my mother is she is a naturalist at heart, and she ended up going to school for zoology and education, and got a job at the St. Louis Zoo as the director of education. And so she actually is the she was obviously a huge force in my life, because she's got that kind of encyclopedic memory of like you ask her about any animal and she'll tell you like all of this information well beyond like what you'd expect someone to know about, you know, any type of bird or fox or frog or whatever. And then my dad was very much into kind of more spiritual practices, kind of like shamanism adjacent, and like he also identified with his, you know, sliver of Native American heritage, and so he that's how he practiced his spirituality, was like going to sweat lodges every Saturday down on a parcel of land that was kind of shared by him and some of his friends. And so, you know, I would go down with him, and so while they were in the sweat lodge and they were like, you know, doing their ceremony, I would like be orbiting that lodge and like in the surrounding creek beds and walking up and down and like turning over rocks and finding salamanders or like catching crawfish. And like for me, there's this like really strong, I'm just so grateful for that, like that foundation that I was given, because I feel like so much of what I do now is referenced in those experiences. And so this picture that I'm trying to illustrate is that like I have these two sides. There's this naturalist side that like, you know, I know what spiders and snakes and like animals are out in the woods. Like there's no illusion there about like the mystery of the creatures that are out to get me. You know, like I have the like, but I'm also like, you know, able to recognize like pattern differences and stuff like that. Like I, at a very early age, was like encouraged to like to recognize what kind of lizard I was catching or whatever. And I was always always the kid who was like finding like frogs or whatever in like the weirdest places on field trips or whatever. I was like nature boy is what they called me.
Ric Flair.
Yeah. And then so yeah, basically like science and like spirituality kind of like come together in the woods for me. And that was kind of like my foundation. And so that's what I was doing, you know, during the summer, or like, you know, a few times during the year. But then at school, like often what I was doing is drawing mazes and doing this kind of like process art of generating, you know, just kind of like traversing like a two-dimensional plane with like concentric circles and lines, and like, you know, obeying the rules of like you have to allow a passageway through. There has to be like a way out of the maze. And I was just fascinated with maze drawing. I did that for like just every day, just filled like notebooks, lined notebooks, like full of mazes. And it was always interesting because I would spend hours and hours and hours building this like, you know, two-dimensional monument to then give it to my friend to solve, and they do it in like, you know, a minute or something. And it was just frustrating. And I realized, you know, in retrospect, it wasn't about them solving the maze. It was more about me building the maze that was more interesting to me. And you know, makes sense now with all the work that I'm doing, that I really just enjoy building something and kind of observing a process as it's growing, and watching those like concentric lines, you know, kind of like develop almost in a way that's beyond me or my intention. And yeah, to me that is the joy of life, is to like just to do these kind of like data simulations and to run those kind of process pieces that way. And that's kind of a common denominator amongst all my work.
Yeah. In talking about that story, I'm curious to zoom in on your recollection or your experience of creating those mazes, and if you have a sense of how that began for you. Like actually, like when was like the first series of mazes that you began to draw, or what was some of like the initial
like
feedbacks?
Kindergarten or first grade. I mean, it was like way back. I mean, that wasn't the only thing I was drawing. I was drawing a lot of bugs. Really, you know, obviously bugs, lizards, snakes, you know, like all of my fascinations, dinosaurs, robots, you know. That was the thing, is so like as an only child, I spent a lot of time alone. Yeah. I had parents who kind of were wrapped into their own worlds too. So it was kind of like, when I was very little, just kind of expected to keep myself entertained.
Yeah.
And that's what I did, is I would often just have a sketchbook, and it kind of became, or I mean, not even a sketchbook. It would just be like, you know, pieces of copy paper, which still kind of carries it through to today.
Did you feel like your parents were supportive of your drawing at an early age?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that I I was always fascinated to like ask my mom, like when, I found out she could draw different animals just like on command. I'd be like, oh, can you draw me this? Can you draw me that? I would just like pull a paper, and like I'm sure she didn't think she was very good, but it just like blew me away that she could just like, imagine these things and be able to generate it on the paper. And she was one who like, we went to like museums and stuff, and she would encourage me to draw things from the exhibits or and yeah, so yeah, I was very much encouraged by my parents, and
Cool.
and that was huge. And I feel like that's the thing of the 90s too, is that like we had so many like arts and crafts resources. It seemed like everything, there was always a craft table at like whatever function that I was at least. But I think that's partially why there's so many artists today, potentially, of our generation, is that like, the boomers were like encouraging their children to like express themselves and to like to generate things. And ultimately I feel like I never really decided to be an artist when I was a kid. It was more just like a lot of people around me saying like observing me and saying, oh, you're going to be an artist when you grow up, right? And me just being like, I guess I have to make that decision. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm going to be.
That is actually like the next thing that I was curious about is if that decision ever, at what point could you make that decision? And it sounds like you're answering it is that like there was a decision that started to take place outside of you, definitely in the beginning, and you say yes, so many times to this is what I want to do when I grow up, because I think adults are really like they have all of the things that they're going through. I think our parents, the generation right before us, if I was to just make a broad sweeping guess, a lot of those people wished that their boomer parents would have supported them in their creative ventures, and a lot of people didn't. So I think parents of millennials kind of range from Gen Xers to boomers can be parents,
Yeah, I guess, really.
of millennials.
Yeah.
So those experiences for them in their childhood were not the same.
Yeah, and I'm assuming a lot. I really, again, need to probably check my privilege before going forward, like.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
But yeah.
But what I'm trying to illustrate there is that a lot of the caretakers that I had as well growing up attached to my creativity, and it sounds like they did that for you. And I think that some of that attachment comes from this absence of being supported in that way when they were a child. Yeah. So then moving forward, do you have a sense of an experience where you took under your own control this idea of being creative or making work for a living or following this creative dream? Like, was there a shift that took place or?
Well, and I guess another a huge element that I have yet to mention in this conversation that has produced who I am is the school that I went to, was the College School of Webster Groves. Very, very lucky to go there. Very privileged to have that experience. Was a hands-on experimental learning school. But it was like a small class that I was in, and generally when there was like a project that had some creative element, everyone wanted me to be on their group, to make the poster, make the whatever, because I was always the most creative. And so that was a way that it was encouraged. Like I was able to recognize myself in that group setting, and it's so funny, like in high school or whatever, like I remember we'd have like classes, you start a semester and you go to new classes, and the teacher will have you do like an icebreaker and like have everyone say something interesting about yourself, and someone like may have like, broken all their bones in their body at one point in their life, or they'd like ridden a jet ski, like those are, but like mine was always like, I'm an artist,
Okay.
And then I remember going to art school, like, and doing the same icebreakers, and like everyone, in a community suddenly where everyone's answer is like, oh, I'm an artist or I'm creative. Suddenly like no one's unique, like it kind of becomes this new situation of like how you define yourself. But like just going to art school from the public high school education I had that really did not seem to have any real grasp on what being an artist in the real world really was, or even
Mhm.
what was happening in, anywhere in the art community. Going into art school where there's like my peers have like had art high school education and like have so much more knowledge than I do. It really was a culture shock and took me a long time, even I'd say years after I graduated, to really grasp who I needed to be or what I needed to create to be able to like make being an artist successful or make myself make it ultimately profitable, which still climbing that mountain to figure out what that's going to look like.
Yeah, that's a big challenge, and I think, so one of the things that I'm interested in sharing with our audience is the ways that you convince yourself of being able to create things, or like being an artist. Like, so much about what you talk about in your path has to do with situations that surround you, and also had to do with eventually like this like method of defining yourself and redefining yourself and redefining yourself, in that iteration over like the entire course of time. I think that people struggle with their own creativity in adulthood if it wasn't continuously fostered for them in one way or another as a child, or it wasn't a part of the discussion, or wasn't something that, because every time somebody said, Ben, you should do the poster, it's like this outward, out to in reinforcement of this experience that you're having. So I don't really know exactly how to translate that, but I just think it's interesting to consider the difference between like choice, and then even maybe encapsulating some of this privilege talk that you talk about, is that like artists as privilege and like art as privilege, and it's just not. I just think most clearly it's important to know that like being an artist is a choice, but it's like this iterated choice, and to start to see it reflected to you in your reality helps reiterate that. But it's a really complex system to go from not being an artist to being an artist, and internalizing that state of creativity and being able to share that with others. Very simply, most of the stuff that you make is not going to be good. Most of the stuff that you make is going to be probably bad. You're going to feel that it does not immediately connect to the idea that you're trying to convey. And the amount of time that when I am active in the creative process, that it is not going the way that I want it to go, and it is not looking the way that I want it to look, is nearly 100% of the time. It's like the translation between like what my mind and what my brain is able to imagine as some beautiful potential reality, and the way that reality appears on a standard basis is completely mistranslated. Like, my brain does not think in reality. It is.
Well, I think you're talking about expectations too, and this is actually making me think of like advice that I was given, when trying to paint from life. That like that feeling of like anxiety and like frustration that you're like not able to render, this still life the way that you want it to be, is actually a sign that you do know what is good. You do know how to make it good, but you're just like struggling with like the hand-eye coordination and the like the. And that just takes time. That just takes time of like climbing up the mountain. That's exactly what the metaphor is all about, is that like you kind of, at a point I just had to kind of like learn to accept the anxiety as part of the process. And at this point I kind of enjoy asymmetry at a point. Like it's weird. I feel like I rarely make symmetrical stuff anymore. It's more like I really like weird scale shifts and stuff like that, because that sense of unbalance for me is an opportunity to like add something else, and to like kind of to push it this way a little bit, to push it that way a little bit, just like subtle shifts that can keep it moving forward, and And at this point, I feel like even when I'm working on stuff, I never know when it's done, you know, and at a certain point, you just have to walk away.
Walking away is super important because half the stuff I walk away from not feeling perfectly well, feeling very like anxious about or in some way unclear about, a lot of those things clarify, not from walking away, but from walking back to it. All right, so let's move over here to some of the work. So,
you want to start with the images, and then we'll move up to the animations?
Yeah. All right, so we'll start with some images.
Actually, you want to go up real quick? You want to go to my highlights? Go to nets real quick.
Okay.
So you're going to see these kind of flip through real quick. So this is a process that I got really excited about, where I was taking sheet steel and I was cutting it with a plasma cutter, which is like a lot of heat and some pressurized air and electricity. Oh, you can probably turn the audio off on that. I don't know if it. Well,
I can't.
It's fleeting. Yeah, whatever. We'll live with it. Yeah, so I cut it with a plasma torch. So this is it in the process of being cut, and you can see some of the chalk lines there to kind of show where the guides are. And I'm just kind of cutting out those holes inside of it, and then the secondary process, which you saw in that first piece, is texturing it with a heat torch. And what I really love about this process is that I am finding this connection of steel and paper. So in origami, there's this whole trend of wet paper folding. Some of these are videos and not quite playing, but that's fine. So in origami, there's and this is projecting light onto it too. The coolest thing about steel, brushed steel, is the way that it reflects light. Also the most frustrating when you're trying to document it.
I can see how that would be a problem.
Yeah, but it creates opportunities for installation and for to create something that would go behind the back of a bar would be really exciting. Anyway,
so if you own a bar,
yeah, hit me up. Get that steel money.
Bar owners of Twitch.
Yeah. Or, if you want an installation in your house or something. It's a really cool process, and it's very I'm able to be intuitive with it. And just to finish that thought that I just had, so it's, to me, I see a connection with wet paper folding with origami, because as you're using the heat torch, it's just contorting it just a little bit, and it's kind of it's manipulating the metal, and it's doing this thing. I was at an art fair actually in St. Louis at the Shaw Art Fair years ago, and I saw a metal artist, and they was making these steel pieces that were like really like liquidy and like really fluid, and I was so surprised, and I was like, when I was taught, I was talking to him, and I was like, when I was taught metal, I was always kind of like frustrated with how everything was square and everything was like hard and like, earthy. And he was like, yeah, that's, kind of the opposite of what metal really is. Like, it really is more liquid. Like, you got to think about it as like a liquid. And that's something that stuck with me until I was able to get into a metal studio again, and be able to kind of explore that with these metal nets. So this is definitely the kind of culmination of my sculptural practice, are those pieces. Although now that I'm in grad school, I'm kind of starting to move into soft sculpture, which we'll get to in a little bit. But starting with what we have on the page right now, these are a lot of digital designs that I've been generating. And I've been really having fun with the kind of just formatting of Instagram, and that you have the slides that as you flip through, there's no pixel gap in between, so you have to do you want to click on one of these? Actually go down a little bit. This one's really good.
And the experience,
I don't know if it's gonna work on. Yeah,
the
it's not gonna work on here.
experience is a little different.
So yeah, well, if you look at this on your phone, and you flip through, if you swipe through them, you can actually see this become a singular landscape. Right now, I think with the zoom and everything, it's kind of cropping things in a way. So yeah, definitely check this out on your phone.
It seems a little bit better when we go backwards.
Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button.
See it slowly, but yeah,
we can go back to the thumbnails. That's probably a better place to be.
It was cropping it quite a bit.
Oh, and this is my dog. If anybody's interested, she's the best dog in the world. That's my eye. That's my crusty eye. Okay.
All right. We'll adjust.
I'll get out of that.
Oh, sorry.
I think if you just want to zoom out, actually, just
Well.
Or are you stuck on? Or
I am not zoomed in. This would be zoomed in.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. Maybe we can.
You know what, let's just go to the video. That's fine.
Let's go to some videos.
So these are some things I have cooking. You want to go to Untitled 3, actually.
Yeah.
So this is a good example of these designs in an animated form. So, okay, I guess we have to download it. Thanks for bearing with us.
You gotta love
travel agents. I don't know what you're calling them, but
fellow travelers.
Travelers.
Yes.
Space-time travelers. Yeah, so I've always really liked Adobe Flash, now known as Adobe Animate, which is not at all a popular animation program to use and is continually being kind of pushed out of relevancy. But I still find myself coming back because I love to generate these kind of forms. And so what I'm doing in Illustrator on the images I'm doing here also in Flash Animate, I'm making a shape and then generating the color and then copying and pasting it all the way across. And each shape, each instance, each symbol has the same rotation put on it. And so at each instance, I also rotate it a little bit more. So it creates that kind of like skeletal snake structure in this specific one. Each one has its own kind of like tweaks or like variations to it. But yeah, recently I've been researching more about color. That's kind of something that I've been learning from painting is like color, like, you know, finding ways to balance color. Also screen printing. I'm really getting into like CMYK and like understanding color as it operates with like ink and overlay, but also then coming back to painting, like the way that color works with like light. And so I'm finding ways to create color patterns that I think are create a lot of variation in a small amount of space. That can be shown in this format that's kind of like cycling format where you can see things churn and see all the different sides of it. But you know, it's frustrating because I spend so much time on these things and then I post them online and then I see someone who just like, you know, spent like 20 minutes in Cinema 4D make something that just blows my stuff out of the water, and it makes me wonder if I need to update my tools and work on something else.
Yeah.
But
this is a video you sent me a couple weeks ago here.
Oh yeah.
So this might help explain some of the process stuff that you were talking about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so this is actually me generating it in Illustrator in real time too.
So what about like upgrading the tools and would help the generation? You know, like I don't understand the difference between those different.
Well, when I had an opportunity to like do some like video DJing with a collective here in St. Louis, and there was another animator there, TJ, Terrifying Jellyfish, on Instagram. Check him out. He's really good. He's making some video games right now. It's really exciting stuff. And it was just this reality of like seeing our well, it was also like we were showing it at the Pulitzer, and they have like they didn't want to project onto the Donald Judd because the light's going to degrade it. And but they had the music down there, so they had the music in one area and then the animation somewhere else entirely. It was just like a very weird experience. And then they decided instead of using the large projector to use the small one. So all of my preparation, all the hours of work I put into this, we're expecting to have the thing projected onto the musician as they were playing. So I had these like really rich textured pieces, like a lot of, you know, detail that were condensed to a postage stamp on the wall, you know. And so his stuff, he was working in like Blender and I can't remember the other program. Sorry, TJ. But he was making these really beautiful things that, you know, he admitted to me took like very little time at all. But like because of the how much of a powerhouse the programs are, they're able to like generate three-dimensional things, orbiting planetoids and stuff that are really impressive because of how far technology is advanced.
I see. And
the programs that I'm using are just a little bit dated and a little bit, they don't have that same kind of like gleam of like new, you know, 21st century technology. Anyway, and so I just kind of felt frustrated ultimately that like, you know, you just have to like kind of compete. You have to like keep up to date. You have to have the current fit, you know, if you want to look impressive at the thing. But But yeah, also it was still a really positive experience, and I still really love doing like video DJ and stuff. Ultimately, these animations are really best suited, I think, for playing behind live music. And if there's anybody out there interested in that, please hit me up. I really am looking to donate these videos for the sake of, you know, just better circulation.
Yeah.
Oh, did you fast forward?
I just wanted to jump forward a little bit.
Yeah, well, when I had actually made these videos, like I sped them up ×5 because I knew how long they are. But this is good. So you saw the shape being built. You saw me kind of like add some distress to it, and now this is me copying it. And there's some automation in Illustrator too. So you see that little window pop up. That's me like hitting the R button and just adding a rotation of like 2 degrees or something. So each time I hit it, I move it, and then I copy paste. Move and then rotate. Here I'm not even rotating it because I like to add that variation. Because so much of this comes down to just like how you see the shapes line up next to each other and create that kind of oblique angles. And this is something that is like really important in landscape painting. That like that's how you create proper landscape, is how you overlap and you can create really beautiful depth that way. But ultimately what I'm creating are like snake skeletons. So and I don't know. I mean, I have no idea what this is going to look like, really. By the time I'm done with it, I really just kind of move across the page, and it's taken a long time to figure out how to like kind of properly zigzag across it too.
Look at all those.
That's noisy. Yeah. Well, and this is me then like tweaking it to kind of fit the frame better and to find what kind of
obliterate itself.
Well, it's just black and white. I mean, this is actually like pretty low in terms of like computation.
Oh, that's good.
When I'm trying to do the same stuff in like After Effects, no way. No, I cannot.
Just rip.
Yeah, it hates it.
You were saying that it's taken some time to kind of understand how to transpose it or how to find the right space.
Yeah, and to properly crop it or to like get the right curves. And even this one, I'd say I'm ultimately not 100% pleased with. And what was really, I think, actually working with Instagram, and again, if you go on my on mobile and see Instagram there, you can see this better demonstrated, that by having it cropped to squares that create a line, a longer like landscape, I can create these finer moments amongst like a longer piece in a longer format, that it provided a better system of spatial organization and decision making. So
yeah, and I like the way that you've been using Instagram as like a medium and a part of the art making process. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity on Instagram to use the capabilities of the platform itself to start to create interesting. I'll just mute you while you're drinking. You're good. If you're worried about it, but yeah, like seeing you can create relics on Instagram, or things can go through different processes. Like you shared that really cool image actually promoting our stream today, and then I was able to take that and share it to my page and add like different textures to it, and just using the capability of Instagram as an image processor and also as a space for images to be housed is really interesting. That swipe feature, I love that the swipe feature on Instagram is seamless, and I don't think it's always been that way. I think there used to be white borders.
Well, I mean, it used to just be a single image too.
That's true.
And then they just, it's interesting to really see how it evolves too. Yeah, and to like kind of some old posts just like look like trash because of like how the program's changed. Because I was designing it for how it was, and now it's different, so it doesn't quite work the same way,
Yeah.
But yeah, now it's got an interesting format that is an opportunity.
So back with Ben here, I think we want to go through some other notable works of art or other things that you want to share with our viewers.
Well, why don't we download the Fire Coral and MP4? That's the one that actually has audio. I think I already sent that one to you though, right?
You did.
Yes. Cool. Yeah. So this one I think is kind of was the breakthrough of kind of like getting back to making music just like a week ago, really, maybe a little bit more, and kind of being a little bit more serious about the animations. So yeah.
So yeah, we'll open this up. This one was playing in the browser at some point, so we'll see if it wants to do that today.
If the audio works. Yeah. And so this is on my Instagram. The formatting was kind of funny, but this is how it's meant to be seen. So here we go.
Yeah, I love how it changes so much right there. Big transition point.
Yeah, and that's something that, well, and then you start to see the frame itself is starting to rotate too. I love the subtle, like trying to create all these subtle shifts happen simultaneously. And that's what's cool about the music is that I'm in GarageBand, I'm able to kind of do those subtle shifts in coordination with the animation. And kind of go back and forth, you know, between different, from the animation to the music to add things at different times. Because it's all kind of part of the same song, you know? The animation is part of the music.
Ah. Very nice.
Yeah, that's the most satisfying ending I've ever done. I don't think I'll ever be able to recreate it.
Endings are hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if we look to popular culture or to any kind of media, usually the endings are typically the place where things fall the most flat.
Yeah, and I mean, even in like a celebrity's, you know, arc of popularity, at some point, if you stay in too long, your fan base is going to want to consume you, you know, and devour you. Like there's that kind of cannibalistic quality almost to like anything. So you have to be able to walk away before, you know, like at the peak or like right after. I actually like, well, in coming back to art making, because that's what we're talking about. Like I compare it to cooking in that, you know, when you're like, you know, sauteing vegetables, there's like a moment of like, you still have that crisp color, you know, still have the nutrition, but it's like singed just enough. If you go too far, the vegetables get ruined or it burns, you know, which is like a very direct metaphor to like, you know, pen on paper is like at a certain point you put too much ink in, it oversaturates and it burns through. So you got to be able to like know when to walk away.
So how do you know when to walk away?
I don't always. I mean, I definitely, I spend hours on a piece and sometimes it's like 10 minutes too long. And then it's like, oh, well, that was an experience, but I don't think I have anything to show for it, you know?
I had the most clear experience of that at Kansas City Art Institute. I took a workshop drawing class with Jim Sajovic, and it was a class where we were drawing stones. So in the beginning of the workshop, I think he just had like a box of rocks, and all of the students would come up and choose one of the rocks, and then what you would do is you would do increasingly larger and larger scale drawings of the rocks, and then we were asked to then make abstract drawings based on the information that we generated through the drawing of the rocks.
That's great.
And in art school, I was just like fueled by Adderall and coffee and cigarettes. Like those were like the three sides of my triangular pyramid, and there was nothing else really going on. But there was a moment where I got just so into the zone in these charcoal drawings, and I had this drawing that was like bifurcated. On one side, there was a bunch of, it was like very light, and on the right side, it was very dark, and it had this wonderful break, and it just kind of happened naturally through my Adderall fueled rage, and and there is this moment where I know now that the drawing was incredible, and there was almost a buzz in the room that was taking place because the work was getting to this point. But I wasn't satisfied with it because I began this drawing thinking about something completely different. So I just kept working it, and Jim came up to me like in the middle of me working on this piece, and he was like, "Hey man, I want you to stop.
Just like walk away."
Yeah, like you need to really consider what you have here. You like really need to consider what you're doing. And in my deep adolescent knowledge, I was like, well, if it's good now, it's going to be even better when I get it to the
Kinda
place.
Like, screw you, Dad. I'll show you.
Yeah, and then I just bared witness to myself just completely fucking up this drawing, just completely destroying it, like right before my eyes, which wasn't a new experience. I had that experience making drawings before, where then I would ruin it, and then at some point it would reveal itself better. But in this particular case,
it had a phoenix moment. Are you able to like kind of reclaim it sometimes?
Yeah, it did not take place with this
Charcoal
particular drawing.
it's another example of like oversaturation. Yeah.
It just started to dissolve and disintegrate in front of my eyes, and that was a good moment of reckoning for me, is that sometimes other people know things that I don't, and the ability that I have to create something beautiful is in some cases directly proportionate to my ability to completely destroy it. So what are the ways that you ask people to support you, or like what are some ways that people could support you in a fashion that you think is like appropriate, or that you really enjoy?
Well, my whole reality, I think, orbits around my Instagram page. So in a way, I feel pretty similar to like an Instagram model, where it's like at this point, I'm just asking for validation and for encouragement. So following me on Instagram and commenting on my work, or just sending me messages and communicating. And I love that. I love feedback. I love seeing what other people are doing too, and growing the network and the community that exists out there.
But yeah, I definitely encourage all of you, and this is something that I'm taking into my practice, is commenting on other people's stuff. It doesn't have to be anything. It can just be emojis. It can be something you notice. It can be just like, keep up the good work. Like, you're going to look like a nerd, but you're going to look like a nerd who supports your friends and cares about one another. And the more that we can do that with each other, I think that builds these communities and these networks.
I love that as a line. You're going to look like a nerd who supports their friends. Like, that should just be the tagline of travel agency.
Yeah.
That's great.
And we all have these experiences where somebody you admire is engaging with your work, and it can be that little bit of sunshine, like in otherwise cloudy creative experiences of like, oh, it took them nothing, but like it is meaningful. That's why I would say that. So some rapid fire questions here. Just going to kind of run the gamut of different things, and we're going to open the conversation back up to life. So if anyone has any questions for Ben, please drop them in the chat, and I'll kind of pepper them in. I know that he would love to answer them. But the first question is, what is one simple thing that you're trying to get good at right now?
Making music, understanding chord progressions, and I want to learn guitar so bad, but I know it's just not in the cards, not right now. But eventually,
some would say that's not simple, but
it is not. No, that is a much steeper mountain than I have shoes for at the moment. So, yeah.
Cool. When was the last time somebody offered you sparkling water or still water?
I mean, anytime I go over to my girlfriend's house, she's always got sparkling water.
My favorite line of the I Love It video from Kanye West and Lil Pump. Are you familiar with that song?
I have the image burned into my mind of them dancing around in those weird foam bottle outfits. So, yeah.
Kanye has this way of like saying verses that are so like strange and lame, but as time goes on, I feel like I recognize the genius of it.
Yeah.
Like my favorite part of his verse is like, "When's the last time they asked you if you want sparkling or still?" And it's like, I think it encapsulates
So
this
loaded.
idea
There's so much there.
of like, how affluent are you? Like, what
Yeah.
restaurants are you going to?
Yeah.
Like, when's the last time you walked into some place and they cared enough about you to ask you if you wanted sparkling water or still water? I just think it's a genius line, so I like to ask other people that.
Well, there's a. It's funny because I offered you sparkling water when you came over, and yeah. Anyway,
I'm living a life of opulence.
Well, and it makes me think of a line by a rapper that I like. I think so. The rapper's name is Milo, but he has a lot of pseudonyms, which I think is really interesting. That he like tests out these different identities. I feel a kinship with that, with how many times I changed my identity, to kind of find the right title that fits. But his line is like, in rich folks' homes, drinks come with coasters, which I think is interesting. Which we got coasters in here, yeah. Which I guess we're on the other side.
There's, yeah, or the really common one I think is like, where is your trash can located? Is like, is your trash can in a drawer or a cabinet versus like out in the open?
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that was a designation for me, like starting to go to like my rich friend's house when I was a child. They had like special compartments, for their trash cans.
I don't know.
Okay, I'm moving on. What is your favorite type of gum? This podcast vlog is sponsored by 5 Gum.
So I have to choose 5 Gum.
No, you don't. No, I just want to make sure everyone knows. Is that
why there's 5 Gum scattered everywhere?
Yeah, they don't know that they sponsor. They don't know that they sponsor the travel agency yet. But the travel agency is what it feels like to chew 5 Gum. Now I go over to you. What is your favorite type?
That's why my head's exploding in this like sound chamber. Yeah. Favorite type of gum? I like a good tropical gum. Trident generally is my go-to. I think they've got good packaging, and that really is the reality of what we consume. Is it comes down to packaging. And I just like their whole like multi-tiered thing. Flips open. It's kind of like a wallet or something. But just really bright, colorful packaging with the aluminum. But the flavor is like consistent. It lasts. The chunkiness of it too is really like pleasant to bite into. Almost like a quarter slice of like Bubblicious. You know,
yeah.
It's like it's still got that like juicy
Because Trident doesn't have a hard shell. It's
no.
It's not like Dentine.
Soft all the way through.
Yeah. It does have that like classic bubblegum bit, and they have a good tropical flavor. That's what you're saying?
I mean, I usually go for a tropical flavor if I'm grabbing something in the impulse section. But I think the most recent one that I was into, I think, was like a passion fruit berry.
Okay.
But I'm open to like new gum experiences. So if I see something I haven't tried before, I'll go on that adventure. Why not?
Okay, cool.
Moment of vulnerability.
Think about checking out 5 Gum. Have you ever successfully completed a game of Monopoly in your life?
Oh yeah, I've lost. I've won. I've had the board flipped over on me because I was winning. I've been there.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, you don't lack perseverance. That much is clear from.
I love games. I'm in it, not necessarily to win it or compete against other people. I mean, but like more of just to do it, to like be good at it. Like that's the thrill I get, and to like be better than I was yesterday. Like if there's something that I don't understand, I'm gonna try to figure it out. Just like music and like chord progressions. Or guitar, yeah.
If you weren't in your current profession and you could just choose a profession and be proficient at it, what would you be doing?
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because I feel like when I went to art school and was doing a bunch of drawings and didn't really know much about construction or anything, I feel like certain judgments were placed upon me by like, say my father, that like I wasn't like blue collar enough or like tough enough. And I ended up getting a job at IKEA where I was actually driving a forklift and which ultimately my favorite part of the whole job was actually being on the ground and like moving boxes around and there was I was able to develop this kind of workout routine of like just sliding boxes across the ground, full of like they'd be pillows, but it'd be a big box, so it'd like end up being something a little bit heavier with like friction and everything.
I have to interject real quick.
Yeah.
Do you ever watch the show Nathan For You?
Yes.
Nathan For You has a segment where he turns a moving company into like a fitness community.
Yeah, which is brilliant. I
Yeah.
love that. I don't think I've seen that clip, but yeah, that's a great idea.
Basically, people paid to work out as employees of the moving company.
Genius.
Yeah.
But to answer, I mean, I don't know. I honestly, I don't work at IKEA now, but like, I would love to go back and just move boxes. Like, there's something about that kind of transcendent labor, about stocking shelves and stuff like that I like. So
Being an art preparator may be for you.
maybe there's a little bit you can be. I mean, not necessarily rough, but you could be a little bit like tough with some stuff. I don't know. Art preparator, there's a little bit of anxiety I have there about like the client hovering over me, just being like, you know, like. But.
My stint as a preparator for the Kemper Art Museum, we had a lot of different box moving experiences. For their Ai Weiwei show, we had 30 crates full of bricks from his demolished studio in Shanghai. So with those boxes, you could beat them up. It was like 30 tons of bricks total. So it was an incredible amount. So you could beat those up, but then other times you're using that same forklift moments before or moments after to move a de Kooning in a crate.
Yeah.
If you had to choose between Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and the Disney Channel, which one would it be for you?
Cartoon Network.
Cartoon Network.
I didn't have cable growing up, so really it was mostly just like, there'd be 2 episodes of Simpsons on at like 6 p.m. every day, or like recess in the morning, hence the obsession, was like my cartoon fill, or going over to a friend's house to watch Cartoon Network. Most often Samurai Jack and like, which is really like the height of animation, I would say. Or Powerpuff Girls, both Gennady, I'm going to butcher his name, but
sure.
But his projects, very cinematographic, a lot of really cool layering of images, but like elevating animation to this kind of fine art quality. And like Courage the Cowardly Dog, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Very good. Do you tie your right shoe or your left shoe first?
Either or. I mean, I really don't have that nailed down to the point of where like I know which one comes first. It's probably more about proximity. Like even when I sign my name, it's like Ben Bradshaw, but like when I come back, I do this B first and then this B set. Like so, it's like more about where my hand is than it is about like right or left. But when I am tying my shoes, my cat really likes to get involved. If I'm tying my boots, then my laces are kind of long and they flip out in a way that he then gets, creates interference for the whole operation. But it's a moment of play, before I go to work or school or whatever. So yeah,
I'm sure your buddy cherishes that moment.
He does, because he's desperate for attention. I got a lot of animals that just want to play all day, but.
Are you more likely to be the giver or the recipient of the bird while driving? Like flipping someone off.
In the essence, I'm the giver. But I don't. Oh no, I do flip the bird sometimes. I more just yell. I'm just like, what's this jerkhole doing? Just like it's. Mad. I get road rage, yeah, for sure. And I'm sure I get it too. I don't always check to see if someone's mad at me, but I am very conscious of if I'm in anybody's way or like causing inconvenience to other people, which people aren't, and that really frustrates me. So yeah, the giver.
Okay, good. In a general sense, what are your thoughts on quinoa?
The ancient grain?
Yeah.
I'm keen on it.
He was prepared. We didn't send these questions over beforehand. These were supposed to kind of get Ben off balance, but it seems like it's an impossibility.
Oh man, but like puns, it's a disease, really. I can't help myself. But you could probably have more of a grill to like really get me off balance. I encourage you to try to throw me off balance next time. Yeah.
Yep.
From the get-go, like starting off, just like if you had to kill one of your parents, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just
Good.
kidding, Mom and Dad.
Uzi, find out next time. So those are your thoughts on quinoa? Great.
All about it.
Moving on. To take a to wrap up with this 10th question here, what is the most memorable response that you've gotten to your work?
I don't know. I mean, like I obviously like love praise, but I can't remember really any praise at the moment. I feel like I remember criticisms more than that. Um, because those criticisms are something that like are a challenge to myself. Actually, this is, I think the most appropriate one for this question is that um, so when I wasn't a sculptor, when I was like more of an illustrator and I took workshops at KCAI, I took a Steve Whitaker workshop, and it was the tower workshop. And so the whole point of it was to build structure and to build towers. Of course, there was very little um, technical instruction on like how to use tools or like how to actually build anything. And at one point, I decided I was going to build a tower. It was a multiples project, and I thought it would be clever to build a tower out of chocolate chips. And I thought, oh, I'm going to melt chocolate chips and build a structure out of melted chocolate, not knowing anything about tempering chocolate. It was a disaster, and it was like heavily criticized. Basically, I took these courses that were sculpturally oriented and realized that's what I wanted to learn, which ultimately prompted me to like go into sculpture. When I was there, I took like one mold making class. It was like probably one of the few technical classes I actually took there. That really got me obsessed with plaster casting. And I was making a lot of these like mounds, these plaster mounds that were cast inside of carved out clay bowls. I would make, an indent and then carve into it, kind of drawing, develop a nice balance or asymmetrical balance flow of texture, and then cast the plaster inside of it, and then like excavate the clay off of it. And it was always exciting to like kind of see what that process would turn into. Anyway, when I was doing that, years after that tower workshop, I was doing that process. I was in a critique with Whitaker and Rush Rankin, I think was his name. He was a poetry professor, and he was giving me a lot of praise, and Whitaker was not about that. He was like, oh, this poetry professor doesn't know what he's talking about. There was a weird energy in the room. And later, Steve Whitaker called me to his office, and he was like trying to talk to me and give me advice, and he thought, oh, maybe I'll give him some like abstract advice. Maybe that'll stick, which ultimately it did. And he told me to go to the Nelson Atkins in Kansas City, art museum there right next to KCA's campus. Go to the Nelson Atkins and look at the Asian art exhibit. Look at the funerary horses, the camels, and look at the difference between a horse that's laying down and a horse that's standing up. Because, he saw these lumps on the ground, not having space, not getting up, not having like room beneath them. They needed to be more dynamic. Is the way that I ultimately took that. But I just chewed on that, for so long that it eventually propelled me into ceramics, and I'm the creatures that I'm making now are these like horses that that are based off of funerary horses in that from that section of the museum. Wow. And like many other museums. If you go to SIC, if you go to many other art museums, they have them everywhere. It was a very popular thing. Yeah,
that's some general advice for people. To walk around the whole museum. Yeah,
but like the advice, the note that really stuck out for me was there's a difference between a horse lying down and a horse standing up. And I think it talks about agency. It talks about, your willingness to be a horse that's standing, instead of a horse that's just lying down. I feel like we live in a world where it's really easy just to lie down and not to be active, but like to figure out what that image is or what that metaphor is for you in your own life of a horse standing up is really important.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting towards the end here. We want to thank Ben Bradshaw at spacetime.mtn on Instagram for joining us today. I thought it was a really wonderful conversation, and you were really the most active and biggest supporter of the travel agency right now, and we really appreciate that. And it's great to have you on the flagship show and to have you here so early in the process. For those of you that are viewing, Ben will be back with us in upcoming weeks and months. We plan on having artists coming in. Like next week we have Ashley Delgado, a friend of mine, St. Louis. I'm not sure how she considers herself, but she does more illustrative work. She's doing some collaborations with some wildlife charities and she's doing some wildlife images for collaboration with social activist charities. So we're going to have different artists on each week, but Ben's going to come back with us at some point and we can go deeper down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to be doing.
More about Recess and other 90s movies.
Yeah,
and shows.
We'll prepare the media. Well, maybe Ben will give us a full presentation on the contemporary context and the reasons why Recess is an important philosophical text.
Oh man, I mean, film essays are the best. I would love. That's actually if I could get a job doing it, I would love to just make film essays and make the videos like that. That would be so good. Anyway, and if anybody out there has any questions for me, like feel free to message me. Check me out. I also have a ceramics page on Instagram at Dragon Clasp. Dragon Clasp. Yeah, all one
word.
one thing.
Cool.
And yeah, that's about it. So yeah, if you have any questions for me or you want Rick to ask a question next time, just shoot it to me or him or